Welcome everyone to this training which covers the delivery of the Pearson Edexcel Foundation and Higher project. The purposes of this presentation are to cover the content and structure of both the Level 1 and Level 2 project qualifications, to understand how both the Level 1 and Level 2 qualifications are assessed, and discuss how to put together a project proposal form. We will also consider what outcomes a learner can complete whilst doing the project. We have included some examples of learner work at both levels and have guidance on the range of support available for this qualification. We shall also address some common issues that you might face when running these qualifications. We'll start by looking at the content and structure of the Foundation and Higher project qualifications. The Level 1 and Level 2 projects are different to other qualifications because they allow learners to choose a topic that they enjoy and are interested in, and to research it in a way that suits their learning style. The choice of topic for the learner is a key factor in the success of the project, as it should motivate the learner to find out more about a topic that they are keenly interested in. In a nutshell, what learners choose to study should be a topic that the learner is interested in and motivated by. It could be based on a topic from their studies, a hobby, or an area of interest to them outside of their school curriculum. Whatever they choose, it should have sufficient depth to engage the learner across the recommended 60 guided learning hours. As you can see from the tables, both levels of project require 60 guided learning hours. This is a recommendation. Obviously, some learners may take slightly longer than this to complete their work to their satisfaction. We will now go on to consider how the project is assessed. Here we can see how the project is graded. The Higher project, Level 2, has grades equivalent to the old GCSE standard, where an A star is directly equivalent to half of the old A star at GCSE. The lowest grade is a C, which used to be the basic pass grade. Marks under this are a fail. If learners would not achieve a C at the Higher project, they should be entered for the Level 1 Foundation project. The Level 1 Foundation project is graded A star, A and B, where the A star is equivalent to half of the old GCSE grade D, the A to the old E, and the B to the old F/G grade. We decided to produce the A star, A and B for the Level 1 because we felt gaining an A or an A star for these learners would be a very motivating factor in them successfully completing the project. There are 4 assessment objectives for both sizes of project. Learners need to submit evidence for all 4 in their final project. AO1 is about managing the project. Learners need to demonstrate how they are going to, and how they have, managed their project to reach the final outcome. The evidence is submitted in the form of a project proposal form and an activity log. Both these documents can be downloaded from the project website. Details of these can be found at the end of this presentation. Assessment Objective 2 requires learners to show what sources they have found to inform their project outcome. They need to submit a list, best done in the form of a bibliography, that references all the sources found. This should provide written information as to whether the sources were relevant, and at Level 2, they should also need to comment on the reliability of the sources. Learners can submit this evidence in the form of a table if this is helpful to them. This would certainly be the case for Level 1. Assessment Objective 3 attracts the most marks for the qualification. This is where learners do the main bulk of their project, realising their project outcome. Specific requirements for this evidence relevant to the individual outcomes will be covered later in this presentation. Assessment Objective 4 requires learners to reflect on both the project outcome and the process taken to get to that outcome. Learners need to review how well they have done, what skills and knowledge they have gained, how they could improve on the outcome, and what they might do differently if they undertook another project. It is important here to emphasise that one of the good points about the project at both levels is that the outcome is not the only piece of evidence that actually produces marks. The learner needs to show how they have got to that outcome. In other words, having awareness of the processes that they have gone through. The next two slides show the marks available for learners for each assessment objective. The total marks for both levels are 40. There are 2 mark bands for each assessment objective, and details of the evidence needed to attract marks in each mark band are found in the assessment grid for the projects in specification. Please note that there are separate assessment grids for both Level 1 and Level 2 projects. The depth of evidence would be expected to be greater in a completed Level 2 project. The current slide shows Level 1, and this slide shows the requirements for the Level 2 project. This slide provides further detail on the evidence learners need to submit for Assessment Objective 1. In order to gain marks in Mark Band 2, the information on the project proposal form should be detailed and not just jotted down very quickly. The project title should be divided into smaller project objectives. The main activities that need to be carried out to complete these objectives should be provided in Section 3. Timescales should be realistic and dated so that the progress towards achieving these objectives can be mapped and charted in the learner's activity log, with reasons given for changes to the initial plan. The rationale for the choice of project should be detailed and mapped to, for example, further studies or career aspirations. This slide covers the evidence needed for AO2. At Level 2, it is useful if learners are encouraged to make some comments on whether they think a source found is reliable or valid. At Level 1, it is fully expected that learners will need some support from their mentor or assessor in order to find suitable information for their project. This is completely acceptable and indeed expected at Level 1. This slide shows information regarding the evidence that needs to be submitted for Assessment Objective 3. This objective attracts the most marks for the project. For this assessment objective, learners need to complete their project to the outcome. For a written report, learners should use their information to write the report on their research question as given in the project title. The highest marks will be gained by learners who argue for and against the research question, and then finally reach an evidence-based conclusion. If the final outcome is a performance, referred to in the specification as an ephemeral outcome, learners need to show the stages that they have gone through to reach it. This evidence can be submitted in the form of a table showing the various stages of the process. If relevant rehearsals are carried out, this should be noted and evidenced, and reason given for any subsequent changes made to refine the final outcome. If the final outcome is an artefact, the learners need to support this with some written evidence that cites the various changes gone through to refine the final outcome, and reasons should be given for choices of materials used, and so on. Learners should consider any alternative designs and give reasons for why these were disregarded. This written evidence could be submitted in the form of an annotated sketchbook, for example. Consider the scenario on this slide. As the assessor, what comments do you make and why? You can pause the presentation at this stage to make notes and restart when you are ready. In answer to this question, assessors should consider that this evidence is the outcome only. The learner needs to provide some evidence for the process that they went through to realise the magazine, including how sources were used and why certain articles were included. Lack of evidence of the process and choices made would restrict marks to Mark Band 1. For the second activity, consider the scenario shown here. What does the learner need to do next? As before, you can pause the presentation to make notes and restart when you are ready. In this scenario, the evidence is for the process only and not the outcome. The learner needs to finish their project by submitting the website designs and documenting the decision-making process. If they do not do this, they will be very unlikely to gain good marks for assessment objective 3. This slide summarises the evidence requirements for AO4. It is important that the learner covers all the requirements as listed in the assessment grid in order to gain marks in Mark Band 2 for this assessment objective. At Level 1, assessors can award an extra bonus mark for each assessment objective if they consider that the learner has worked fairly independently. At Level 1, this does not mean without any support at all, but does mean that the learner has taken advice and then acted on it independently. At Level 2, the learner is expected to work more independently in order to be awarded this mark. It is important that assessors, when actually awarding this mark, make comments on the assessor feedback form so that the moderator can appreciate why this mark has been awarded. This slide shows a summary of the evidence requirements. Assessors are asked to ensure that learners submit all required evidence alongside the project outcome. This slide outlines the assessment process for the project. This is the same for both levels. This slide clearly states the awarding body requirements for moderation. Typically, a centre would send in a sample size of 10 projects, or if there are less than 10 learners in total, then all the projects. And these are submitted to the awarding body for external moderation. Please note that if the 10 sample of projects does not include the highest and lowest scoring candidate, these projects also need to be sent to the awarding body. Here, further explanation of the bonus mark for independent working is provided. This slide introduces some points around how you can support learners in making a good project proposal form. The choice of project title is the absolute key to a successful project outcome. The choice should be centred around a topic that the learner likes and is motivated and interested to find out more about. Support from the assessor is vital at this stage to ensure that the choice of project title is not too vague and that it will allow learners to access relevant sources of information. Tidying up and tightening the project proposal at this stage is the most vital part of the procedure. The project should be driven by the personal choice of the learner, giving them the opportunity to look at something of interest to them and being rewarded for this. This could be from their personal hobbies or interests, or something from their schoolwork. Having chosen an issue that interests them, learners should be encouraged to take significant ownership of their project objectives. Learners should be encouraged to make a significant personal contribution to this choice. Through the mentor or tutor assessor, they may be able to decide on a range of themes from which learners can choose. Assessors should help learners ensure that the project that they have chosen can be successful. Here are some questions that you may wish to ask when reviewing project titles. Here are some points that should be followed to ensure a successful project choice. Assessors or mentors should check that there is a clear focus for the project and clear ownership of project objectives by the learner. Have a look at these 3 possible project titles for a written report. Do you think these would generate a successful project? Pause the presentation to consider these and make some notes. Restart when you are ready. As you can see, the first 2 project titles can be answered by just providing a factual report. They don't provide the learners an opportunity to argue a point and to provide alternative views to lead to an evidence-based conclusion. In contrast, the 3rd project title does provide this, allowing learners for the opportunity to present a balanced argument and a clear conclusion of their choice based on the evidence provided by the sources. This particular project title would be likely to attract very good marks throughout, particularly in Assessment Objective 3. We will now look at project outcomes and the evidence required for each. Here are the minimum evidence requirements for a written report. The project proposal form and activity log can be downloaded from the project website on the Pearson Edexcel project qualification area. Here is some guidance regarding what a level 1 written report could look like. The word counts given are recommendations only. Learners should not be penalised for providing a higher word count, but of course within reason for a 60 guided learning hour qualification. Similarly, here is some guidance for what a well-written level 2 report could look like. Again, the word counts given are recommendations only. As at level 1, learners would not be penalised for providing a higher word count, again within reason. We are not expecting learners to provide a book. Here is guidance for what evidence might look like for a performance outcome where the learners actually carry out something. There is a lower recommended word count here for this type of outcome, and the report should focus on the stages that the learner has gone through and how ideas have developed. For this type of outcome, learners need to provide a record of the outcome itself, either via video or audio or so forth. So here we are looking at two pieces of evidence for the outcome. We are looking for the actual outcome itself, which we can view, and we are looking for evidence to support the development of this outcome and ideas that went into it. Here guidance is provided for what evidence might look like for an artefact outcome. Similar to the performance outcome, learners should make sure to include supporting information that demonstrates the stages they have gone through and how ideas have developed. For this type of outcome, learners should be supported to carefully consider how they are going to actually construct their artefact or produce the work listed in their design brief. It is very important that learners show how they have made choices regarding what type of materials and designs they are considering. Here is some further guidance for the outcome. For this outcome, marks are awarded for careful consideration of the process gone through. This should all be clearly evidenced in the form of an annotated sketchbook, for example, charting each step of the making process. This slide provides some guidance on the best way to present an artefact or design outcome. Obviously, for the artefact, if learners are making something large, it would be impossible to send this through the post for moderation. One would expect a reasonable number of annotated photographs to be sent instead. Here we are going to look at an example of a level 1 project. An example of a level 1 project is available for you to download. Consider the following questions in relation to the project. Pause the presentation here to download and review the work and restart when you are ready. The commentary for this work has been provided. Pause the presentation to take some time to read this now, or you may choose to read it later. The assessor has correctly placed the work in Mark Band 2 for AO1, but at the lower end, as timescales and monitoring of progress could be more detailed in the activity log. For AO3, the assessor has correctly placed the work in Mark Band 2, and there is an answer to the question and some evidence of supporting arguments. In total, this is a very respectable piece of level 1 work and is awarded 32 out of 40 marks. How did you get on with this? Would you have agreed with the mark awarded? Next, we are going to look at an example of a level 2 project. The level 2 project example is again available for you to download. As for the level 1 example, please consider the following questions in relation to the project. Pause the presentation to download and review the work and restart it when you are ready. The commentary for this work has also been provided. As previously, you can pause the presentation to read this now or read at your leisure later. The work provided is detailed enough to award marks just into Mark Band 2 for all of the 4 assessment objectives, but towards the lower end. In total, the work is awarded 29 marks out of 40. How did you do? Do you agree with this moderation mark? If you have queries on this, please don't hesitate to send them in to Ask the Expert and we will get back to you. Now we will take a look at some issues that can occur with a project submission. Here are various problems that can occur with a Level 1 or Level 2 project. Generally, the most important point is to ensure that learners choose an appropriate and focused project title or design brief. Often they choose projects that are too wide-ranging and cannot be covered in the recommended guided learning hours. It is an important role of the mentor assessor here to restrict the scope of the project title and make sure it is refined sufficiently to allow the learner to get the job done in the hours provided. Work with sources can also be an issue for some learners, and it is important that mentor assessors support their learners with this as much as possible, directing them to where they might find valid and useful sources if necessary. In addition, the demands of the project can often be underestimated. It is important that it is made clear to learners from the onset what the requirements for the qualification actually are. This slide provides a quick summary of the project qualification and what we have discussed in this training. There is a wealth of resources available to help you support learners through completing a foundation or higher project. These can be found on the Pearson Edexcel project website in the foundation and higher project areas. Finally, access to further support is shown here, including the new Future Ready website, which is available now for you to visit. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope this training was of use to you.